Alright, welcome back, guys. We are going to finish Coraline. Um, she got away from her mother. She saw her parents and ghost kids go through the door. The cat and her came through the door. She was holding the cat. They're friends again. The cat fell asleep on her lap, and then she fell asleep in the armchair. And that's where it stopped. So, seeing how the two more chapters left, I don't think we're quite done with Other Mother. So, I guess we'll have to read and find out, won't we? Chapter 12. Her mother shook her gently awake. Coraline, she said, darling, what a funny place to fall asleep. And really, this room is only for best. We looked all over the house for you. Coraline stretched and blinked. I'm sorry, she said, I fell asleep. I can see that, said her mother. And wherever did the cat come from? He was waiting by the front door when I came in, shot out like a bullet as I opened it. Probably had things to do, said Coraline. Then she hugged her mother so tightly that the arms began to ache. Her mother hugged Coraline back. Dinner in 15 minutes, said her mother. Don't forget to wash your hands and just look at those pajama bottoms. What did you do to your poor knees? I tripped, said Coraline, and she went into the bathroom and washed her hands and cleaned her bloody knees. She put ointment on her cuts and scrapes. She went into her bedroom, her real bedroom, her true bedroom. She pushed her hands into the pockets of her dressing gown, and she pulled out 3 marbles, a stone with a hole in it, the black key, and an empty snow globe. She shook the snow globe and watched the glittery snow swirl through the water to fill the empty world. She put it down and watched the snow fall, covering the place where the little couple had once stood. Coraline took a piece of string from her toy box and strung the black key on the string, and then knotted the string and hung it around her neck. There, she said. She put on some clothes and hid the key under her t-shirt. It was cold against her skin. The stone went into her pocket. Coraline walked down the hallway to her father's study. He had his back to her, and she knew just on seeing him that his eyes, when he turned around, would be her father's gray eyes, and she crept over and kissed him on the back of his balding head. Hello, Coraline, he said. Then he looked around and smiled at her. What was that for? Nothing, said Coraline. I just miss you sometimes, that's all. Oh, good, he said, and he put the computer to sleep, stood up, and then, for no reason at all, he picked up Coraline, which had not done for such a long time, not since he had started pointing out that to her she was much too old to be carried, and he carried her to the kitchen. Dinner that night was pizza, even though it was homemade by her father, so the crust was extremely thick and doughy and raw, or too thin and burnt. And even though he had put slices of green peppers on it, along with little meatballs and all of the things, pineapple chunks, Coraline ate the entire slice, and she ate everything except for the pineapple chunks. And soon enough it was bedtime, and Coraline kept the key around her neck, but she put the gray marbles beneath her pillow, and in the bed that night Coraline dreamed a dream. She was at a picnic under an old oak tree in a green meadow. The sun was high in the sky, and while there was distant fluffy white clouds on the horizon, the sky above her was deep and untroubled blue. There was a white linen cloth laid on the grass, bowls of piled high with food. She could see salad and sandwiches, nuts and fruits, jugs of lemonade and water, and thick chocolate milk. Coraline sat on one side of the tablecloth, while 3 other children took a side each. They were dressed in the oddest clothes. The smallest of them, sitting on Coraline's left, was a boy with red velvet knee breeches and furry white shirt. His face was dirty, and he was piling his plate high with boiled new potatoes and with what would look like cold, whole-cooked trout. This is the finest of picnics, lady, he said to her. Yes, said Coraline, I think it is. I wonder who organized it. Why, I rather think you did, miss, said a tall girl sitting opposite Coraline. She wore a brown, rather shapeless dress and had brown bonnet on her head, which tied beneath her chin, and we are more grateful for it and for all that ever words can say. She was eating slices of bread and jam, deftly cutting the bread from a large golden brown loaf with a huge knife, and spooning on the purple jam with a wooden spoon. She had jam all around her mouth. Aye, this is the finest food I've ever eaten in centuries, said the girl on Coraline's right. She was a very pale child, dressed in what seemed to be a spider's web, with a circle of glittering silver set in her blonde hair. Coraline could have sworn that the girl had 2 wings, like dusty silver butterfly wings, not bird wings, coming out of her back. The girl's plate was piled high with pretty flowers. She smiled at Coraline as if it had been a very long time since she had smiled, and she had almost, but not quite, forgotten how. Coraline found herself liking this girl immensely, and then, in the way of dreams, the picnic was done, and they were playing in the meadow, running and shouting, and tossing and glittering ball from one corner or from one to another. Coraline knew it was a dream then, because none of them ever got tired, or winded, or out of breath. She wasn't even sweating. They just laughed and ran in a game that was partly tag, partly piggy in the middle, partly just a magnificent romp. 3 of them ran around the ground, while the pale girl fluttered a little over their heads, swooping down on the butterfly wings to grab the ball and swing up again into the sky, before she tossed the ball to one of the other children. And then, without a word about it being spoken, the game was done. The 4 of them went back to the picnic cloth, where the lunch dishes had been cleared away, and there was 4 bowls waiting for them, 3 of ice cream and 1 of honeysuckle flowers piled high. They ate with relish. "Thank you for coming to my party," said Coraline, "if it is mine." "The pleasure is ours, Coraline Jones," said the winged girl, nibbling another honeysuckle blossom. If there were but something we could do for you, to thank you, and to reward you." "Aye," said the boy with the red velvet breeches and the dirty face. He put out his hand and held Coraline's hand with his own. It was warm now. "It's a very fine thing you did for us, miss," said the tall girl. She now had a smear of chocolate ice cream around her lips. "I'm just pleased it's all over," said Coraline. Was it her imagination, or did shadows cross the faces of the other children at the picnic? The winged girl, the circlet in her hair glittering like the star, resting her fingers for a moment on the back of Coraline's hand. "It is over and done with for us," she said. "This is our staging post. From here, we 3 will be set out for uncharted lands, and what comes after no one alive can say." She stopped talking. "There's a but, isn't there?" said Coraline. "I can feel it, like a rain cloud." The boy on her left tried to smile bravely, but his lower lip began to tremble, and he bit it with the upper teeth and said nothing. The girl in the brown bonnet shifted uncomfortably and said, "Yes, miss." "But I got you 3 back," said Coraline. "I got my mom and dad back. I shut the door. I locked it. What more was I meant to do?" The boy squeezed Coraline's hand with his. She found herself remembering when it had been she trying to reassure him, when she was a little more than a cold memory in the darkness. Can't you give me a clue?" asked Coraline. "Isn't there something you can tell me?" "The Bedlam swore by her good right hand," said the tall girl, "but she lied." My governess, said the boy, "used to say that nobody's ever given more to shoulder than he or she can bear." He shrugged as he said this, as if he had not yet made his own mind up whether or not it is true. "We wish you luck," said the winged girl. "Good fortune and wisdom and courage, although you have already shown that you have all 3 of these blessings, and in abundance." "She hates you," blurted out the boy. "She hasn't lost anything for so long. Be wise, be brave, be tricky." "But it's not fair," said Coraline in her dream angrily. "It's just not fair. It should be over." The boy with the dirty face stood up and hugged Coraline tightly. "Take comfort in this," he whispered. "Thou art alive. Thou livest." And in her dream, Coraline saw that the sun had set and the stars were twinkling in the darkening sky. Coraline stood in the meadow, and as she watched as the 3 children, 2 of them walking, 1 flying, went away from her across the grass, silver in the light of the huge moon. The 3 of them came to a small wooden bridge over a stream. They stopped there, turned, waved, and Coraline waved back. And what came after was darkness. Coraline woke in the early hours of the morning, convinced that she had heard something moving, but unsure what it was. She waited. Something made a rustling noise outside her bedroom door. She wondered if it was a rat. The door rattled. Coraline clambered out of bed. "Go away," said Coraline sharply. "Go away or you'll be sorry." There was a pause, and then the whatever it was scuttled away down the hall. There was something odd and irregular about its footsteps. If they were footsteps. Coraline found herself wondering if it was perhaps a rat with an extra leg. "It isn't over, is it?" she said to herself. Then she opened the bedroom door, and the gray pre-dawn light showed her the whole of the corridor completely deserted. She went towards the front door, sparing a hasty glance back at the wardrobe door, mirror hanging on the wall at the other end of the hallway. Seeing nothing but her own pale face staring back at her, looking deep, sleepy and serious, gentle, reassuring snores came from her parents' room, but the door was closed. All the doors off the corridor were closed. Whatever the scuttling thing was, it had to be here somewhere. Coraline opened the front door, looked at the gray sky. She wondered how long it would be until the sun came up, wondered whether her dream had been true thing, while knowing in her heart that it had been. Something she had taken to be part of the shadow under the hall couch detached itself from beneath the couch and made a mad scrambling rush on its long white legs, heading for the front door. Coraline's mouth dropped open in horror, and she stepped out of the way as the thing clicked and scuttled past her out of the house, running crab-like on its too many tapping, clinking, scurrying feet. She knew what it was, and she knew what it was after. She had been seeing it too many times in the last few days, reaching and clutching and snatching and popping black beetles and obediently into the other mother's mouth. 5-footed, crimson-nailed, the color of bone. It was the other mother's right hand. It wanted the black key. Alright, so that's the end of that chapter. So, is it over? Nope, the ghost children, they're going to wherever you go that no person alive knows. But they told her it wasn't over. She was coming back for her. And did she come back? Well, her right hand did. That's never a good thing, right? So, we're going to find out. This is it. This is the last chapter. We're going to find out if the other mother gets her, if she escapes, how, whichever one happens, and we shall see. All right, chapter 13. Coraline's parents never seemed to remember anything about their time in the snow globe. At least they never said anything about it, and Coraline never mentioned it to them. Sometimes she wondered whether they had ever noticed that they had lost 2 days in the real world, and came to the eventual conclusion that they had not. Then again, there are some people who keep track of every day and every hour, and there are people who don't. And Coraline's parents were solidly in the second camp. Coraline had placed the marbles beneath her pillow before she went to sleep that first night home, in her own room once more. She went back to the beds after she saw the other mother's hand. Although there was not much time left for sleeping, she rested her head back on the pillow. Something scrunched gently as she did. She sat up and lifted the pillow. The fragments of the glass marbles that she saw looked like remains of eggshells one finds beneath trees in springtime, like empty broken robin's eggs, or even more delicate, wren's eggs perhaps. Whatever had been inside the glass sphere had gone. Coraline thought of the 3 children waving goodbye to her in the moonlight, waving before they crossed that silver stream. She gathered up the eggshell-thin fragments with care and placed them in a small blue box, which had once held a bracelet that her grandmother had given her when she was a little girl. The bracelet was long lost, but the box remained. Miss Spinks and Miss Forcible came back from visiting Miss Fink's niece, and Coraline went down to their flat for tea. It was Monday. On Wednesday, Coraline would go back to school. A whole new school year would begin. Miss Forcible insisted on reading Coraline's tea leaves. Well, looks like everything mostly ship-shape and Bristol fashion, lovey, said Miss Forcible. Sorry, said Coraline. Everything is coming up roses, said Miss Forcible. Well, almost everything. I'm not sure what that is. She pointed to the clump of tea leaves sticking to the side of the cup. Miss Finks tutted and reached for the cup. Honestly, Miriam, give it over here. Let me see. She blinked through her thick spectacles. Oh dear. No, I have no idea what that signifies. It looks almost like a hand. Coraline looked. The clump of leaves did look a little like a hand reaching for something. Hamish the Scotty dog was hiding under Miss Forcible's chair, and he wouldn't come out. I think he was in some sort of fight, said Miss Spinks. He has a deep gash on his side, poor dear. We'll take him to the vet later this afternoon. I wish I knew what could have done it. Something, Coraline knew, would have to be done. The final week of the holidays, the weather was magnificent, as if the summer itself was trying to make up for the miserable weather they had been having by giving them some bright and glorious days before it ended. The crazy old man upstairs called down to Coraline, where he saw her coming out of the Miss Spinks and Miss Forcible's flat. Hey, hi, you, Coraline, he shouted over the railing. It's Coraline. Sorry, hey, hi, you. Caroline, he shouted over the railing. It's Coraline, she said. How are your mice? Something has frightened them, said the old man, staring his mustache. I think maybe there's a weasel in the house. Something is about. I heard it at night. In my country, we would have put down a trap for it, maybe put down a little meat or hamburger, and then the creature comes to feast, then bam! It would be caught and never bother us more. The mice were so scared that they will not even pick up their little musical instruments. I don't think it wants meat, said Coraline. She put her hand up and touched the black key that hung around her neck, and then she went inside. She bathed herself and kept the key around her neck the whole time she was in the bath. She never took it off anymore. Something scratched at the bedroom window after she went to bed. Coraline was almost asleep, but she slipped out of her bed and pulled open the curtains. A white hand with crimson fingernails leapt from the window ledge onto the drain pipe and was immediately out of sight. There was deep gouges in the glass of the other side of the window. Coraline slept uneasily that night, waking from time to time to plot and plan and ponder, and then falling back into sleep, never quite certain where her pondering ended and the dream began. One ear always open for the sound of something scratching at her window pane or at her bedroom door. In the morning, Coraline said to her mother, I'm going to have a picnic with my dolls today. Can I borrow a sheet? An old one you don't need any longer as a tablecloth? I don't think we have one of those, said her mother. She opened the kitchen door that held the napkins and the tablecloth. She prodded about it. Hold on, will this do? It was a folded up disposable paper tablecloth covered with red flowers left over from some picnic they had been on several years before. That's perfect, said Coraline. He didn't think you played with your dolls anymore, said Miss Jones. I don't, admitted Coraline. They're protective coloration. Well, I'll be back in time for lunch, said her mother. Have a good time. Coraline filled a cardboard box with dolls, and with several plastic doll teacups. She filled a jug with water, and then she went outside, walked down the road just as if she were going to the shops. Before she reached the supermarket, she cut across the field into some wasteland and along an old drive, and then crawled under the hedge, and had to go under the hedge in 2 journeys in order not to spill the water for the jug. It was a long roundabout, looping journey, but at the end of it, Coraline was satisfied that she had not been followed. She came out behind the dilapidated old tennis court. She crossed over to the meadow where the long grass swayed. She found the planks on the edge of the meadow. They were astonishingly heavy, almost too heavy for a girl to lift, even using all her strength, but she managed. She didn't have any choice. She pulled the planks out of the way, and one by one, grunting and sweating with the effort, revealing a deep, round, brick-lined hole in the ground. It smelled damp in the dark. The bricks were greenish and slippery. She spread out the tablecloth, laid it carefully over the top of the well. She put the plastic doll cups every foot or so at the edge of the well, and she weighed each cup down with water from the jug. She put a doll in the grass beside each cup, making it look as much like a doll's tea party as she could. Then she retraced her steps back under the hedge, along the dusty yellow drive, around the back of the shops, back to her house. She reached up, took the key from around her neck. She dangled it from the string as if the key were just something she liked to play with. Then she knocked on the door of Miss Squeaks and Forcible's flat. Miss Spinks opened the door. Hello, dear, she said. I don't want to come in, said Coraline. I just wanted to find out how Hamish was doing. Miss Spinks sighed. The vet says that Hamish is a brave little soldier, she said. Luckily, the cut doesn't seem to be infected. We can't imagine what could have done it. The vet says some animal he thinks, but has no idea what. Mr. Bobo says he thinks it might have been a weasel. Mr. Bobo? The man in the top flat. Mr. Bobo. Fine old circus family, I believe. Romanian or Slavian or Lavanian or one of those countries. Bless me, I can't never remember them anymore. It had never occurred to Coraline that the crazy old man upstairs actually had a name, she realized. If she had known his name was Mr. Bobo, she would have said it every chance she got. How often do you get to say a name like Mr. Bobo out loud? Oh, said Coraline to Miss Spinks. Mr. Bobo. Right, well, she said a little louder, I'm going to go and play with my dolls now over by the old tennis court round the back. That's nice, dear, said Miss Spinks. Then she added confidentially, make sure you keep an eye out for the old well. Mr. Lovett, who was here before your time, said that he thought it might go down for half a mile or more. Coraline hoped that the hand had not heard this last, and she changed the subject. This key, said Coraline loudly. Oh, it's just some old key from our house. It's part of my game. That's why I'm carrying it around with me on this piece of string. Well, goodbye now. What an extraordinary child, said Miss Spinks to herself as she closed the door. Coraline ambled across the meadow towards the old tennis courts, dangling and swinging the black key on a piece of string as she walked. Several times she thought she saw something the color of bone in the undergrowth. It was keeping pace with her about 30 feet away. She tried to whistle, but nothing happened, so she sang out loud instead, a song her father had made up for her when she was a little baby, and which had always made her laugh. It went, "Oh, my twitchy witchy girl, I think you are so nice. I give you bowls of porridge and I give you bowls of rice, cream. Bowls of ice, cream. I give you lots of kisses and I give you lots of hugs. I've never given you sandwiches with bugs in." That was what she sang as she sauntered through the woods, and her voice hardly trembled at all. The dolls' tea party was where she had left it. She was relieved that it was not windy day, for everything was still in its place. Every water-filled plastic cups weighed down the paper tablecloth as it meant to. She breathed a sigh of relief. Now was the hardest part. "Hello, dolls," she said brightly. "It's tea time." She walked close to the paper tablecloth. "I brought the lucky key," she told the dolls, "to make sure we have a good picnic." And then, as carefully as she could, she leaned over and gently placed the key on the tablecloth. She was still holding onto the string. She held her breath, hoping that the cup of water at the edge of the well would weigh the cloth down, letting it take the weight of the key without collapsing into the well. The key in the middle of the paper picnic cloth. Coraline let go of the string and took a step back. Now it was all up to the hand. She turned to her dolls. "Would you like a piece of cherry cake?" she asked. "Jemima, Pinky, Primrose. And she served each doll a slice of invisible cake on a visible plate, clattering happily as she did so. From the corner of her eye, she saw something bone-white scamper from one tree trunk to another, closer and closer. She forced herself not to look at it. "Jemima," said Coraline, "what a bad girl you are. You've dropped your cake. Now I'll have to go over and get you a whole new slice." And she walked around the tea party until she was on the other side of it to the hand. She pretended to clean up spilled cake and to get Jemima another piece. And then, in the skittering, chittering rush, it came. The hand, running high on its fingertips, scrambled through the tall grass and up onto the tree stump. It stood there for a moment like a crab tasting the air, and then it made one triumphant, nail-clacking leap onto the center of the paper tablecloth. Time slowed for Coraline. The white fingers closed around the black key, and then the weight and the momentum of the hand sent the plastic doll cups flying. The paper cloth, the key, and the other mother's right hand went tumbling down into the darkness of the well. Coraline counted slowly under her breath. She got to 40 before she heard a muffled splash coming from the long way below. Someone had once told her that if you look up at the sky from the bottom of a mine shaft, even in the brightest daylight, you'll see the night sky and stars. Coraline wondered if the hand could see stars from where it was. She hauled the heavy planks back into the well, covering it as carefully as she could. She didn't want anything to fall in. She didn't want anything ever to get out. Then she put her dolls and her cups back into the cardboard box, and she had carried them out, and something caught her eye while she was doing this. She straightened up in time to see the black cat stalking towards her, his tails held high, curling at the tip like a question mark. It was the first time she had seen the cat in several days, since they had returned together from the other mother's place. The cat walked over to her and jumped up onto the planks that covered the well. Then slowly, it winked one eye at her. It sprang down into the long grass in front of her and rolled over onto its back, wiggling about ecstatically. Coraline scratched and tickled the soft fur on its belly, and the cat purred contentedly. When it had enough, it rolled over onto its front once more and walked back towards the tennis courts like a tiny patch of midnight in the midday sun. Coraline went back to the house. Mr. Bobo was waiting for her in the driveway. He clapped her on the shoulders. "The mice tell me that all is good," they said. "They say that you are our savior, Caroline." "It's Coraline, Mr. Bobo," said Coraline. "Not Caroline, Coraline." "Coraline," said Mr. Bobo, repeating her name to himself with wonderment and respect. "Very good, Coraline." They might say that I must tell you that as soon as they are ready to perform in public, you will come up and watch them as the first audience of all. And they will play Tumpty Umpty and Toodle Oodle as they will dance and do the 1,000 tricks. That is what they say. I would like that very much, said Coraline, when they're ready. She knocked on Miss Sphinx and Miss Forcible's door. Miss Sphinx let her in, and Coraline went into the parlor. She put her box of dolls down on the floor, and then she put her hand into her pocket and pulled out the stone with the hole in it. Here you go, she said. I don't need it anymore. I'm very grateful. I think I may have saved my life and saved some other people's death. She gave them both a tight hug, and then both tight hugs, although her arms barely reached around Miss Sphinx, and Miss Forcible smelled like the raw garlic she had been cutting. Then Coraline picked up her box of dolls and went out. What an extraordinary child, said Miss Sphinx. No one had hugged her like that since she had retired from the theater. That night, Coraline lay in bed, all bathed, teeth clean and her eyes open, staring up at the ceiling. It was warm enough that, now that the hand was gone, she had opened her bedroom window wide. She had insisted to her father that the curtains not be entirely closed. Her new school clothes were laid out carefully on her chair for her to put on when she woke. Normally on the night before the first day of term, Caroline was apprehensive and nervous, but she realized there's nothing left about school that could scare her anymore. She fancied she could hear sweet music on the night air, the kind of music that could only be played by the tiniest silver trombone and trumpets and bassoons on piccolos and tubas, too so delicate and small that their keys could only be pressed by tiny pink fingers of white mice. Coraline imagined that she was back again in her dream, with the two girls and a boy under the oak tree in the meadow, and she smiled. As the first stars came out, Coraline finally allowed herself to drift into sleep, while the gentle upstairs music of the mouse circus spilled onto the warm evening air, telling the world that the summer was almost done. Alrighty, so that's the end. So did Coraline, so we know the hand was coming back. Did Coraline able to stop the hand? Yeah, Coraline stopped the hand. How did she do this? She was tricky, so she got her tablecloth and her dolls, and she was going to set up a tea party picnic. She went the long way around so nobody could follow her. She set it all up in advance. Then she went back around and she loudly talked to somebody about her picnic and her keys and stuff. And then the hand followed her through the woods. And she set the key down in the center of this tablecloth over that well. It jumped up to grab it, fell down, gone. And then she covered it back up. And it all ends well. So I hope you enjoyed this book. I sure did. I've always loved this book. And until the next book, I'll see you guys later. Bye.